Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 585 Takes Sports Podcast. We got a little something newer starting. We got 585 Short, so it's going to be a little bit of a shorter podcast episode. It's just Cole and I again, and today we're reacting to the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL as surveyed by Jeremy Fowler. He takes an annual survey of the coaches, the executives, the general managers, high up positions throughout the NFL, and he pulls that together and makes a list of top 10 positional rankings. And today we're going with quarterbacks. And then after it, we're going to talk about a discussion of who we think are going to be some of the best offenses going into the 2026 NFL season, which, believe it or not, is kicking off in under 2 months now.
Just about 50 days. Let's go.
All right, so I think we're ready to just kind of dive into the list. We'll read off the list that Fowler released, the 10 quarterbacks they had listed, some of the honorable mentions they had, and then any changes that we think need to be made, and we'll give you our own list as well. So starting off at the top, it's pretty AFC heavy at the beginning. 4 of the top 5 quarterbacks. Josh Allen is ranked 1, Patrick Mahomes at 2, Matthew Stafford, the reigning MVP, at 3, Joe Burrow 4, Lamar Jackson 5. And to me, those 5 are kind of interchangeable, but I think kind of separate themselves from the rest of the pack. And then you have Dak Prescott at 6, Justin Herbert 7, Drake May at 8, Jared Goff 9, and Caleb Williams at 10. The 3 biggest honorable mentions listed were Sam Darnold, obviously Super Bowl MVP, and just led his team to the Super Bowl championship, and then Jaden Daniels and Jordan Love. Jaden Daniels obviously hurt for a good portion of last year. And then they also listed Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence, and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think you got all the honorable mentions down. I got some massive problems with this list, though. I will not lie to you. One, you said that the top 5 are interchangeable. I 100% disagree.
Wow.
I could not for the life of me figure out why and how Joe Burrow is still within that top 4 quarterbacks in the league. He hasn't really had a healthy season in the last few years, and he hasn't done anything since he took his team to the Super Bowl in that 21 season. I personally have Lamar and Dak Prescott over Joe Burrow, so that's a big problem from my end. And then as well as this, I mean, listen, I know he just had a massive injury, but what are we doing? Patrick Mahomes not being 1 is criminal. He's been to 5 Super Bowls. He won 3 of them. Meanwhile, Josh Allen, the guy who's in front of him, is 0-4 against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, and he's somehow above him. Mahomes has more MVPs, as well as this, with Matthew Stafford coming off an MVP and a great season that he had, with them now being the favorites to win it all. Going into this next season, I'm putting Stafford above Josh Allen too. So I got Mahomes 1, then Stafford, then Josh Allen, then Lamar Jackson, Dak, then we'll finally fall down to Joe Burrow.
Yeah, so I don't have any major disagreements with you. I actually, right before I pressed record, I switched Lamar and Dak. I had Dak at 5. Or no, I switched Burrow and Dak. I had Burrow at 5 and Dak at 5 and Burrow at 6. And then I decided to put Burrow above him just because of the highs that we've seen from him and just how he has absolutely no help in the past years. And just looking at what the Bengals have been like with him versus a backup in and just how much he can transform that offense. I actually do agree with the ESPN execs ranking Josh Allen as the best quarterback in football. I don't think the gap is obviously I feel like we're kind of, picking straws as to who's better, him or Patrick Mahomes. I think Josh Allen is definitely the more talented quarterback. However, Patrick Mahomes knows how to win, which is a skill that I don't think we always look for, or something that gets a little overlooked, I think, and I'll get to that as we get further down our list. But I do have Josh Allen just edging out Patrick Mahomes. I think the coaching in Buffalo and the overall roster around him has been a little worse than Patrick Mahomes, who I believe has one of, if not the best coach in the NFL, which I think does help a lot. And I know that obviously Brady was able to win one without Belichick. I'm not saying Mahomes isn't good without Andy Reid. Obviously, he's in the GOAT conversation, whether Reid's there or not. But I do think that Andy Reid is part of the reason why they've had so much success, and that Mahomes just owns the AFC. And then I have Stafford at 3, so I'm keeping him behind those 2, even though he just won the MVP season. I do think the Rams and we'll get to this when we talk about the best offenses. Little spoiler alert, I think they have one of the best offenses, so I think that really helps him. And a guy in Sean McVay who is kind of a quarterback's dream in terms of how he's going to scheme up receivers and guys getting open downfield. And then I have Lamar at 4. The Lamar hate is kind of getting a little annoying where it feels like just because he hasn't broken through to a Super Bowl, we give him all this slack. And because he has this loaded offense, he's had a defensive head coach his whole career. So he's finally getting an offensive head coach for the first time. And in the same sentence, like Josh Allen hasn't broken through the Super Bowl either. So why are we just claiming that he is like the undisputed number one and then Lamar can barely be top 5? I don't think the gap is as big. In the stuff about Lamar's a running back or anything like that, I think we're past that, but like that needs to go away anyway. He hasn't had very good receivers throughout his time in Baltimore, and I think this is the most complete Ravens squad that we're going to see in the Lamar Jackson tenure and that we have seen so far. And so I think there's definitely a lot of pressure on him and this team overall, but I'm still including him in my top 5.
Yeah, you touched on a couple things, so I'll get to all of it. First of all, the notion that Lamar is a runner than a passer is just utterly ridiculous. He has the number one passer rating since he's entered the league in the entire NFL, so I don't know where that concept comes from. Obviously, I think it's a lot of the haters that want to be right when they decided on draft day that Lamar was never going to be anything. So I think they're just stubborn right now. And then when it comes to Joe Burrow, now, if you want to make an argument that the lack of talent falls on the defensive side of the ball, sure, they can't guard a parked car. But when it comes to the offense side, let's not act like he's bereft of talent. I mean, the guy looks everywhere and he's got threats. He's got T. Higgins. He's got, I don't know, maybe Jamar Chase, who a lot of people would say is the number one wide receiver in the entire NFL. So it's not like Joe Burrow's throwing the ball to himself over there. And then when it comes to Mahomes and Josh Allen, I just don't understand. I love Josh Allen just as much as the next guy. I think he's an awesome dude. But the fact that anyone can argue that they're even on or eating at the same table is ridiculous to me. Again, Mahomes, 3 Super Bowls to Josh Allen's 0. Mahomes is 4-0 against Josh Allen. And yeah, you can say Josh Allen put his team in the position to win some of those games. For example, they took the lead. Everyone knows the story with 13 seconds left. What happens? Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, Tyreek Hill march down the field, and Harrison Butker make the field goal. However, if it happens 4 consecutive times, luck can only run out at a certain point to where it's actually just Mahomes making more plays than Josh Allen. And I think his inability of making those big plays is a serious problem in the bigger moments. And we saw it again this year. Mahomes was hurt. He was out of the playoffs. Everyone thought this is Josh Allen's year. The big bad wolf is not in his way. He's going to make it to the Super Bowl, and he might even win one. And then he runs into a young team led by a young quarterback in Bo Nix, and he throws 2 interceptions and fumbles the ball twice. That's inexcusable. You can't tell me Patrick Mahomes would do anything of that nature when it comes to the postseason ever. He never has, and he never would. I can't forget that, and I can't forgive Josh Allen for something like that. Against a young Broncos team, sure, one of the best defenses in the league, but let's not act like the Broncos were world stoppers there.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest setback in Josh Allen's career is he's constantly going for the Superman play every play, no matter the situation of the game, where I think, Patrick Mahomes realizes when he has to pull, a rabbit out of a hat versus when it's just simply, let's hit the check down here, let's keep the chains moving. And I think that is, something that Patrick Mahomes really has edge, to step up on Allen in that category. And you may have just convinced me actually to move Mahomes to my number 1 spot, but I do think it is, closer than maybe you've illustrated. And the one thing I'll say about Burrow is that, yeah, the record hasn't always been there, but when he's been healthy, the offense has always been good. Like you mentioned, he has the weapons, and I agree that it's one of the most talented offenses, not just him, with obviously Higgins and Jamar Chase, but when all 3 of those guys have been healthy, the Bengals offense has never been bad. It's always been the defense letting them down. So I don't think you can completely point that at Burrow, but at the same time, if he doesn't have that Super Bowl run, is he like, how do we view Joe Burrow? I feel like we're still leaning too much a little bit on what he did 3 seasons ago.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And the fact with Burrow and the fact that he's been hurt as an excuse is a song that I just can't wait for the band to stop playing, because there's so many players like that. For instance, so many guys in the NBA, so many guys in the NHL, across every league, you can find a guy and say, man, that guy's talent is out of this world, but he's never healthy. And what's the best ability? Availability. And if a guy just doesn't have it, then he's just not your guy. Like, take, for example, Kawhi Leonard. When he's healthy, he's unbelievable. Now, he has a bit of a different argument because he's actually done it multiple times. He's taken his team to the promised land and capitalized, where Joe Burrow's really only taken them once and he didn't capitalize. Sure, he went to a juggernaut with the Rams, but other than that, that one season that you mentioned, he hasn't done anything to where I don't think it's far-fetched. Now, I know Dak's been injured a couple times, but I don't think it's crazy to say Dak is above Joe Burrow. I mean, he has been the orchestrator of one of the top offenses in the league every single season that he has been healthy. And I think he's outplayed Joe Burrow in almost every season besides that one glorious run that we glorify in 21.
Yeah. But I think it's time to move on to the bottom five, especially the bottom four of our top 10, because that's where I think the biggest debates come in for me. I have Dak Prescott at 6. For me, he's just a little too much of an empty stats guy where I feel like when we see him in primetime games and big moments, and I mean, the Cowboys have been the laughing stock of the NFC for a while now because of how long it's been since they made
The
a
NFL.
conference championship. And so I'm not putting that on Dak. He hasn't exactly been this amazing playoff performer while the rest of the team is, leading him astray. I think in the playoffs his play has not been as good. And for me that is, like we were talking with Mahomes, that's very important. So he's a really good regular season QB. I just feel like sometimes the Cowboys with their defense, especially the last couple of years, they get down big. And all of a sudden, it's just, all right, we're just going to put the ball in your hands. And the defense is playing prevent. And I think some of the stats are a little bit watered down from that aspect. But I still think he's very good. And I haven't ranked at 6th. The biggest problem for me, I think, in the whole top 10 is ESPN putting Justin Herbert at number 7. I cannot get behind the Justin Herbert hype. This is like the guy that feels like he was made in a lab who's never done anything wrong. And it's just his teammates and his coach's fault. And I just, at some point he needs to win a playoff game. Like, I don't know why it's like he feels like the one who's winning all the Super Bowls and going to the Super Bowl, and the guy has yet to win a playoff game. They choked that one game in Jacksonville when they were up, I think it was 29-0. You watched them play the Patriots this past season, it was like watching paint dry. I mean, I understand he hasn't had the best weapons around him and his two guards were out last year, but at some point this guy needs to put it together to the point where they're winning playoff games. And the Chargers are the most hyped up team going into every season, it feels like. And for me, they are not an exciting or a fun watch. And yes, Herbert has all the arm strength and talent in the world, but it's not necessarily translating into the best stats in the world or the most wins.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I know we're in agreement on this one. Herbert is irrefutably the worst and most overrated. I'll say quarterback in the NFL, but I can go as far as saying one of the most overrated players in any of the major sports leagues. And I haven't been able to get behind this guy for the past 3 seasons where everyone has just been in amazement of his talent. And yes, he has unbelievable arm talent to where he can get to one side of the field and launch the ball to the other side. But that's half the problem. Half the problem is that he knows he can do it, and he consistently tries to do it, and it consistently falls short, and it gets picked off, or something goes wrong. Because, I mean, you get taught that when you're playing football as a 10-year-old in flag football. You don't go to one side of the field and throw to the other. I mean, that's just something obvious. And he has some of the most talent out of anyone in the league. But when it comes to playing that quarterback position, I think half of it, if not way more than that, is up here in the mind, and I just don't know if he has that. And yes, you could say there was obviously attrition when it came to his offensive line last year. 2 of their guards were out for the entire season, and they debatably had the worst offensive line in the entire league. I do believe it was the worst. But still, it's not a one season that we're counting. This is multiple seasons in count where Justin Herbert has been talked about like he's some god that came down to save the NFL, and he's done nothing with it.
Yeah, and I think, the biggest argument for Herbert supporters would be, I mean, he hasn't had the greatest head coaches in terms of his offensive success while he's been in the league. I mean, Brandon Staley, that dude, like, could not control, like, he couldn't rub his belly and pat his head at the same time. And then you look at Jim Harbaugh, he's a good coach, and he's had success in this league before. He obviously won a championship with Michigan, but his success is rooted on the fact that he wants to play good defense and run the ball, not that he wants to let Herbert let it loose and see, his talent fully unleashed. So I think that's kind of the biggest argument, and you can point to the lack of wide receivers and the unhealthy offensive line, but You know who we've seen overcome maybe not having the greatest head coach or not having a healthy team? We've seen Josh Allen do it. We've seen Patrick Mahomes do it. We've seen guys higher up on this list do it. And so if you want to be a top 10 QB in the NFL, I think you have to be able to carry your team to wins and to playoff success when not everything is lined up and going perfect.
You could argue we've seen Jaden Daniels do it.
And that's it, exactly. And that's just not what Herbert has done. So for me, he can't be the seventh best quarterback. And I have another problem with number 8, Drake May. I'm not ready to put Drake May at number 8 in my quarterback rankings yet. I think he had a very good, obviously, second year in the NFL. He led the Patriots to a Super Bowl. However, I need to see sustained success for a little bit longer. And let's be honest, the regular season was really easy, and their playoff run, they didn't exactly go through the hardest gauntlet we've ever seen. So for me, I think Drake May is getting there, and I think in a couple of years he may be there, but there's other guys I like more than to put Drake May at number 8.
Drake May is an extremely interesting one to me because that comes down to an entire hypothetical game. Because really, like you said, the only argument, because we saw he balled out. He was number 2 in MVP voting for a reason. And that race between him and Matthew Stafford was a nail biter. And the only argument you can use against him is, well, we haven't seen him do it against those better teams. But whose fault is that? It's not Drake May's. He did it. Those teams were put in front of him, and he did it. But I do agree with you. I have a little trepidation that when it comes to him playing against those better teams, he may fall flat, kind of like what he did against the Seahawks. Now, obviously, he's only in a sophomore season, and he made it to the Super Bowl, so you really can't blame him for a poor performance in the Super Bowl because he did everything beforehand. Although his playoff performances weren't great either. He just ran into some horrific offenses, and his defenses came up big when they were needed to. So Drake May is a very interesting one because this is full hypothetical, but I'm kind of on your side too. I do think it's a little early. I have him at number 9. For all the hate I just gave Justin Herbert, I do have Herbert slightly edging out Drake May. And that's only because he's been in the season longer. He has more experience. So coming into this next season, I have a little more faith that Herbert can do it with his new offensive coordinator, Mike McDaniel, who, I mean, we've seen put up 70-point games. Now that Greg Roman got out of there and they substitute Mike McDaniel for offensive coordinator, that will be a fun, exciting watch. But the interesting talk is Caleb Williams falling to 10 after just such an unbelievable sophomore season. I mean, if you look at his highlight reel, you would think that that's some of the best plays anyone's had is in their entire career, but he did it all in one season. He's just a human highlight reel, so I'd love to hear your take on whether or not I think he's higher, he's lower.
Yeah, so on this list they have Jared Goff at number 9 and Caleb Williams at number 10. And I have actually both of these guys higher up just because I don't feel like Drake May and Justin Herbert are there yet. So for me, my bottom 4, I put Caleb Williams at 7, I put Goff at 8, I put May at 9, and I put Herbert at 10. You said it with the way that Caleb Williams played this past season. He was just amazing, so talented. He already got a playoff win in just his first trip there, and they frankly had the chance to win another one. Talking about bad defenses, the Bears defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, it felt like last year. They were kind of pathetic, and I mean, this was his first season with new coach Ben Johnson. There were so many young players on that Bears offense to put it all together the way that they did. I mean, Caleb Williams feels like a younger version of Josh Allen in terms of can he just eat his vegetables sometimes instead of trying to, like wait for mom or dad to leave the kitchen and throw the vegetables out, or to make,
100%.
some superhuman play where it's like, dude, a 360 no looking throw there was not the play. You had a check down wide open. But I just feel like his ceiling is possibly the highest in the NFL when things are going right. And he was able to show that he can raise that floor as well, to the point where I think he's even knocking on the 5-6 spot. I don't think he's that much worse than Dak
Already.
Prescott. I think that he's definitely behind Prescott and those other guys right now, but there's no reason why in a couple of years Caleb Williams won't be a top 5 guy. And then number 8 for me, Jared Goff. He's an interesting one to evaluate because I feel like the Lions offense is kind of made for him to succeed in a lot of ways, similar to how the Rams offense really helps out Matthew Stafford. But I mean, Goff led the Rams to a Super Bowl. He led the Lions to the most success that they've ever had, a place that not even Stafford could take them. I understand that the team is way better around Goff than it was around Stafford, but he's just a guy who feels like, he has two of the biggest, like he'll have 2 or 3 games a year where he throws like 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. And I don't know. I'm a personally a Jared Goff fan myself. I think that the way he plays can translate to winning. Talk about, ups and downs and injury problems. It feels like the Lions haven't been able to get healthy for a full season. And they were just in the divisional round a couple of years ago against the Commanders team that obviously they didn't win, but they were the better team in that game, and Jared Goff was one of the reasons for that. And then rounding it out, I have May ahead of Herbert. And to me, I didn't necessarily want to include either of those guys in the top 10. I just didn't feel right putting someone else above them. I feel like there was kind of a drop off after that, and I wasn't ready to put anyone else above them.
Yeah, I 100% agree. With Goff, I do think he falls farther down the totem pole due to the fact that I think he's got a very high floor but a lower ceiling. I think Jared Goff is a professional game manager. I mean, if you want him to go out, hand the ball off, make the simple throws, the simple reads, and just win you a game, he can do that. But when it comes to the playoffs, I'm just not sure that he can just make something out of nothing like we've seen guys like Patrick Mahomes, like guys like Matthew Stafford with their arms or Josh Allen with their legs do, where they just salvage just terribly broken down plays when there's nothing available and then create something beautiful out of that. I've personally never seen, I can't recall a play where Jared Goff has done something like that. Obviously, he's had some just unbelievable throws. Almost every single quarterback has. There's so much talent out there. But I can't recall a time where it was needed and he just made some superhuman like act to get them out of that spot. So, due to the fact that that ceiling's a little lower, or a lot lower for me, I do have Jared Goff a little lower because I think he can get you into those playoffs and maybe make a bit of a run, but I just don't know if he can win a Super Bowl unless his team is just so much better than everyone else's. Like, I think a great example of that would be the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks really only had one challenge due to the fact that the Patriots were able to get out of the AFC and they took care of them easily, and that was the Rams. So for me, it was really just can Sam Darnold put it together for one game and beat those Rams, to which they were able to do so, to win a Super Bowl? I can kind of compare Jared Goff and Sam Darnold, but if Sam Darnold got down there and he had to make some heroic play, I don't know if he could do it. I just think it's because his team is that much better, and he got a couple lucky paths to the Super Bowl with Drake May being his opponent to where he was able to win one.
Yeah, and so before we move on to best offenses, just talk about the honorable mentions for a second. Jaden Daniels, I think, might have been there after his rookie season, but then the injury issues and, kind of similar to Joe Burrow, it's like, okay, but you only did it for one season. So I need to see it again, and I need to see that it's sustainable and that, look at guys like RG3, who was like this amazing guy. I think Jaden Daniels is going to be better than RG3, but I'm just saying I'm not ready to put him in the top 10 after one good rookie season. And then, we look at Jordan Love, and when the Packers were the 7 seed a few years ago and they went into Dallas and beat the 2 seed, I was like, man, the Packers found the guy after Favre, Rodgers. They just found their next guy, and it's Jordan Love. And then the next couple seasons, they've stayed in that 6-7 spot in the playoffs, and they haven't really done any damage. I know last year, Micah Parsons gets hurt. That's obviously a huge blow, and they had some other injury issues as well. But I was kind of expecting Love to make that next step, and I just feel like he's been too inconsistent for me, where he's a proven starter and he's a guy who I think the Packers should definitely build around moving forward. But is he going to win you a Super Bowl? I'm definitely not sold on that yet. And then we mentioned Sam Darnold. I misspoke earlier when I said that he was the Super Bowl MVP. It was actually Kenneth Walker, and I think that's kind of a reason to leave him out of the top 10. You look at the top 10, their team wins the Super Bowl. How many of those guys are not winning Super Bowl MVP? And now the argument for Darnold is, you look at his season in Minnesota that he had when paired with Kevin O'Connell, he was amazing. And a lot of people, including myself, are like, what are the Vikings doing? Why are they so eager to move on from Darnold to give McCarthy the keys to the offense? And we saw Darnold do it again in Seattle. Now, that was one of the better teams I think we've seen over the last decade, just put together piece by piece. But, Darnold has looked good, and you have to be a good quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I mean, there's a reason that Mahomes has won all these Super Bowls and that Brady won all these Super Bowls, is that usually a team with one of the best quarterbacks wins a Super Bowl. So for me, I'm not ready to put those three in the top 10 yet. I think, Jaden Daniels might be the closest in terms of having a really good season and getting there. But as much as we hated on Herbert, and then the questions we had about May with the tougher schedule are going to get answered this year, but just not ready to put those three guys in there yet.
Yeah, I was super high on Jordan Love, I will be honest. And I still believe in him. I do think come to the end of the season, I think Jordan Love will creep his way into that top 10. I truly believe that. And when it comes to some of the other guys, I agree with you. I think they're right on the edge of the fence, but they just can't get that second leg over to being in that top 10 spot. So I think they're safe to stay where they are as honorable mentions.
All right, so I think we can move on to best offenses in the NFL for this upcoming season. And I kind of just jotted down a list of seven. At the top, I mean, we talked about it already with the Bengals. I think you have to include them with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. It's hard to not talk about them. And talking about a quarterback that we had rated highly and a couple wide receivers who are really good as well, I think you have to include the Cowboys with Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens. Look at the Ravens offense on paper, and I think, it's hard. You have to include them as well. Derrick Henry, while I do think he's starting to slow down, still obviously very good. And finally, with an offensive coach, I think we're going to really see the Ravens get the most out of their offense. And then the other four I had were all NFC teams where the Bears with Caleb Williams, we already saw them be a top 5 offense, I think, towards the end of last year. I mean, I think the Lions are going to be up and down. It's kind of just the nature of, I feel like, who the Lions are. But, man, they have these performances where they just put up like 50 points in the dome, and you're like, man, they're good. And then the two NFC West teams for me, the Rams and the Seahawks. I think the Rams probably have the best overall offense right now with Matthew Stafford, Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams. It just feels like the list goes on and on and on. And then, yeah, the Seahawks had a really good defense, but their offense was still good, and it won them a Super Bowl. So I think you have to mention them on this list.
100%. Have to give the Seahawks their praises. And I think it's impossible to mention any other teams in that top 2 other than the Cowboys and the Rams. And I really don't think you can make an argument for any other team than the Rams being the number 1 offense going into the season. They were number 1 in scoring, number 1 in yardage, and number 1 in success rate. So their efficiency was there as well. So there's not a single spot to where you can point to and say, well, this team had the edge over the Rams there. They had a great equal rushing attack and passing attack. You would think that they just launched the ball every single play, but if you actually look at the numbers, it was a pretty equalized attack led by, obviously, Sean McVay, which only catapults them higher up when you have Sean McVay as your coach, because the Cowboys, obviously, they're great, and their newest head coach, he had a good season last year, but they're still searching for that guy, where Sean McVay, I mean, it seemed like he was the guy in his 20s. He came on the scene as a baby and won them a Super Bowl, and he hasn't taken a step down. So I think a massive spot for the Cowboys is that coach. And they were unbelievable. They were the best offense in the league when they had their coach in Kellen Moore, who in my opinion is the best offensive coordinator in the entire league. I followed him wherever he went. He succeeded with the Eagles. They won a championship. With the Cowboys, he led the best offense in the entire league, and they would have had a chance at winning Super Bowl if their defense just wasn't so terrible. So I can't put the Cowboys above the Rams as of right now, but I do think that's a team to watch, which with George Pickens recently picking up that player, not the player option, but what is it called? Yes, exactly. Sorry. George Pickens picked up, and he didn't make any complaints about that, where I think a lot of people were kind of amazed by that because it's kind of just George Pickens' nature to do so. So I think that was great for the locker room, and I think the Cowboys are going to be right there, but as of right now, I just can't see how you can give anyone the edge over the Rams.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I have Rams, and then I think Cowboys 1-2. Now, before we wrap it up here in a minute or so, I just want your thoughts. For ranking a top 3, I think it has to be between the Bengals and the Ravens and the Bears. And to me, I think I got to give it to the Bengals, but I really do think there's a heated discussion you could have over who's that third best offense.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I can't find a way to give it to the Bengals. Their offensive line is just so terrible that I just can't put them inside the top 3. When you're looking at it, there's 11 guys on the field, obviously, and when 5 to 6 of those guys are going to be on your line, and your line is just as dreadful as it is, I mean, that's almost half your guys. I know they're not the flashy players, because the flashy players they have a ton of. They got Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. I mean, they have the stars, but they don't have the quiet the locker room guys that just make the plays that are needed to be made. For me, I got the Bills. I didn't hate on Josh Allen. I just gave the real of Josh Allen and how he's not number one. Josh Allen is still just unbelievable. And there are plays that he makes where you're questioning if he's human. And they did pick up DJ Moore, who I do think can be a massive deep threat for them, which they've been kind of missing over the past year, ever since Stephon Diggs left. And I think Josh Allen with James Cook, they're just going to continue to ride off into the sunset. Just replace Sean McDermott, and I think Josh Allen's very happy with that. Not that Sean McDermott did a terrible job, but I think Josh Allen and the organization was ready to let go of him. And I think he's going to take that next step, and I would not be surprised if he's the MVP next year.
Yeah, James Cook has certainly added another dimension to that offense. I don't think I'm ready to put them up there, but they're definitely in the conversation. And I think that'll do it for the first five shorts episode, where we went over the top 10 quarterbacks and some offenses that we think are going to be explosive and lead the NFL. So that'll do it. Take care, and we'll see you guys next time.